If you're not compositing your 3D renders, you're doing a terrible job. Hello guys, welcome to this new tutorial. Today we're gonna see together my compositing process for my upcoming short film based on Sly Cooper. The compositing process is sometimes a process that is underestimated by people, by artists, but I think that together with lighting is the process that really can make your renders stand out more and give them a more cinematic vibe. I'm gonna show you a short clip from the trailer that will be uploaded here on YouTube as well, and I'm gonna break it down to you with this video. So the first thing that we're gonna see now is the lighting process in Blender. I'm gonna go real quick on this because I just want to focus this tutorial on the compositing process, but if you prefer a more in-depth tutorial for lighting as well, just write it in the comments. So this is the project file of one of the shots that you saw in the short clip. As you can see, I already divided my project in different render layers. So we have one for Sly only, one for the background environment. As you can see, I'm gonna show you my lighting setup for this single shot. So we're gonna activate here the render view and we're gonna see, okay, so these are all the lights that influence this shot in particular. You see how many lights I just placed around my character in order to make it stand out from the environment. Bear in mind that the effect that I wanted to achieve was basically this one. You see how the lighting just outline the edges of my characters and contrast real well with the background environment, and it really make it stand out more in the final shot. But this is after the compositing process. We still want to get a nice result in the raw render. As you can see, this lighting really helps me out in understanding how more or less it's gonna be the final result. So really pay attention to your lighting and don't be afraid to place more light than usual. Sometimes people tells you that 2 or 3 lights are enough, but in reality, it depends on the shot that you're working on. There are shots that really works with just 2 lights, but there are shots like this one that requires more point lights. Just bear in mind that you have to contextualize the light of your scene. I placed this orange light because over here we have flames, and from behind we have the window that has the same lighting. We have this blue lighting coming from above like it was the moonlight. So everything needs to be contextualized. So really pay attention to these little details. Another thing that may help you out is playing with different radius for your lighting. Bear in mind that I'm using Blender Eevee. You may find different settings if you're using Blender Cycles. I suggest you with all of art to switch and learn Blender Eevee because I think that with the right settings, it's even almost the same quality than Cycles. Of course, that depends on your project and on the quality that you want to achieve. But for example, it takes me more or less 40 seconds to render a frame, while in Cycles, it used to take 2 minutes and more or less the quality was the same. So really pay attention to this small details when you have a project going on, and every little decision from lighting to rendering may affect the render times and may help you out organize your load of work. As I was saying before, you can play with the radius of your lighting. The radius is basically a number, and the less the number is, the sharper the shadows are gonna be. So I'm gonna show you an example so it's gonna be a little bit clearer for you. Okay, I think this one. And basically, if I put the value to 0, you see how sharp this shadow became, and the more I had more values, it becomes softer. For example, I like personally when it's about the lighting behind my characters, I prefer to have sharp edges, but when it's on its face, in this case, and we have the moonlight and a cloudy sky, I prefer to have a little bit more of softer shadow on my model. And after you set up your lighting, the first thing that you have to do is setting up your render passes. If you do not know what render process are, I'll try to be as clear as possible. But if you want to dig more in this part of the process, I suggest you to check my Patreon page, where I'll be uploading a more in-depth process and analysis about this and about 3D workflow in general. Render passes are actually different layers. As you can see here, we have a combined pass, which is like a big box where every other passes are gonna be included. So basically is the final result that you see here in my viewport. This is the combined pass. Even here you can see different passes that you find here as well. So for example, if I want to know what my emission pass is gonna look like, you can click here. And you see that basically it's showing every material in this scene that has an emissive material. So in this case, the reflection of the eyes. If you want to see, for example, the ambient occlusion, here basically it shows you the ambient occlusion is applying into the combined pass. The combined is the group of all of these passes. And the best way to composite your scene is to export the combined pass and some different passes. This is up to you and about how much you want to control the scene in your project. For example, I'm going to show you my compositing project. As you can see, I wanted to just play around with the glare in his eyes. So the first pass I'm gonna export is gonna be the emission pass. And I'll just check it out here in the View Layer tab. Another pass that I definitely want to work with more is the AO passes, so ambient occlusion pass, because as you can see here in my render preview, the shadow are not really that great. I mean, compared to the final compositing where you see a more detail on his shadow occlusion, over here it looks a little bit more blunt and like it's missing some details. So I definitely want to work more on the ambient occlusion in this shot. So I'll just check ambient occlusion as well, shadow as well. Shadow is also important because you are able to contrast the amount of shadow that you want your characters to have. We're going to see this in the compositing process in After Effects, so don't worry if you are not understanding everything I'm saying right now. I'm aware that this is a kind of complex subject to understand, and sometimes it's better that you try it firsthand, and it's going to be a lot easier for you to understand. And once you selected all the passes that you need to export, make sure that you divided your scene in render layers. This is something that is really up to you. Depends on your scene and how you want to divide your shot. So for this shot, I was 100% sure that I wanted to add more details on the back of my character. So I divided my character from the background in order to have a more flexible way to work. And as you can see, it's really easy to me to just work on the environment only or work on the character only. I have a lot more freedom. I am more flexible in my workflow. So really, take a close look on your shot and ask yourself, which elements of this scene is better for me to have separated? There are also other shots like this one, for example, where I actually divided the character in a layer, but even this big object in front of her. So I basically found myself exporting all of this section, even though this is a part of the environment. In this case, it belongs to the foreground, while all the rest belongs to the background. So we don't have like a strict rule to follow for every shot, but it's really up to you and up to the shot. Back to Blender. If you have the full scene here, you basically rename the render layer here, and you press this button to duplicate and add a new. What you have to do is click this button to exclude it from the render view. After you disable this, basically this render layer is only rendering what you're leaving in the scene. So in this case, it's gonna render only my characters and lighting. You do that as many times as many objects you like to compose your shots of. Once you've done all of this, it's time to set up our compositing for rendering our shot. You go into the compositing tab, you make sure to check the use nodes, and you delete it. If you have something here, you delete it, and you press Shift A, output, and file output. This is gonna be the location or where your files will be saved. So make sure you change it here, but you change it also here as well. So make sure that both paths match. Once you set up your location here and here, you press again Shift A, write render layers, and you import render layers. So I'm gonna explain you the logic behind all of this. Here, you write the name of the passes that you need. For example, in my Sly only scene layer, I'm gonna write Sly combined. I'm using a basic naming convention just for me to understand like right away the file that I'm working on. And I'm making sure that here is set to the Sly only, the same scene layer that I'm working on. And I'm going to drag from image to the Sly combined. And we had as many input as passes that we want to export. So in this case, we're going to have 3 more. And we're going to write Sly emissive, Sly AO, and Sly shadow. Another important thing is that you have to duplicate as many render layers as many inputs you have here, otherwise it's gonna be a mess. So we're gonna duplicate 3 more times, and we drag from emit and go to emissive, shadow, and we go to shadow, AO, and we go to AO. The same process you have to do for the environment. So make sure to switch up here and go to the environment scene layer. Make sure to select the most important passes that you want. I suggest you to include the mist because it's a pass that lets you work better, adding more depth in your scene, is used to add fog and that to your shots. So I really suggest you to include that. Do the same you did before. So we have environment combined, environment emissive, and you duplicate as well, but this time make sure that here you switch to EMB only, and you do the same process that you did before. So mist with mist, emit with emissive, AO with AO. Now you're ready to render your shots. Basically, this is everything that you need to know about render passes. Make sure that here you select use for rendering, otherwise you're gonna have problem with rendering your scene. And after you've done this, you're gonna have your render folder like full of frames. It's gonna be a little bit heavy, but I promise you that it's gonna be worth it because you're gonna need all of that ability to manipulate your shot as much as you want. Like it's literally life-changing. It's gonna turn your renders from basic to really cinematic. It's gonna have a lot of more of cinematic look. Now we're done with Blender and we're gonna switch to After Effects, which is our compositing program. You can use NukeX, which is the industry standard, but I always used After Effects my whole life, so I find myself better using After Effects. So we're back in our shot. We have all of the render file. I'm going to show you the steps I took to turn into this more cinematic look. So first of all, I imported my raw renders. So this is the combined only render that we just exported from Blender. I added my ambient occlusion passes. You see here that I played with curves. But remind that most of the passes that you're going to export work with grayscale. So basically, most of them works that the darker the color is, the more you have something. For example, if you add more contrast in the ambient occlusion pass, you're basically going to have more shadow. And you want to make sure that the blending method is set to multiply. Go here to FX, color correction, and add a curve FX, and you just play with intensity based on how much shadow you want your renders to have. After we're dealing with our characters, this is the result that we have. As you remember, I also exported my emissive pass, and why I did that in this particular shot? Well, because as you can see, we have the eye reflection maintained in the combined pass. It doesn't really stand out from the model. So with the emissive pass only, as you can see here, I'm able to to work in separate ways, both my characters and my glowy eye reflection. And this is the result. This is the after and this is the before. You see how much it improved my quality and my raw render going from this to this with only a single pass. And I did the same for everything else. So for my environment as well. You see here I have the raw combined environment, and I exported for this the emission and the mist pass. So the emission, because I wanted the windows to glow up more, because if you see here, we have the nice glow from behind, but I really wanted to pop up more. Added my emissive pass, and you see the before and after. It's giving a really nice touch to this shot. And the same goes with the mist pass, because the mist pass, as you can see here, it's a pass of depth. To play with your mist pass, I usually use curves when necessary. I also added a color correction in order to not have only white pass, but I added this blue kind of color. This is again the final result, and this is with the pass, and this is without the pass. It's a very little difference, but I promise you that in the big result, all of these small details and improvements are really gonna make your scene look a lot better. Then I just added some particles go floating around the scene in order to have a more organic feel to the shot, and added a color correction and a motion blur. This is also something that people tend to underestimate when you're rendering a scene from Blender and you activate here the motion blur, which is this is gonna slow so much your render times. And my suggestion is to deactivate and render without the motion blur. This is the shot without the motion blur, and this is the shot with the motion blur in After Effects. So you see that even in post-production, this is gonna sell the result the same way, and even better, because you can decide how many amount of motion blur you want in your shot. There are shots like this one where I increase my motion blur intentionally because I wanted to sell the heavy movement of the stuff. So it's basically up to you. You're gonna save a lot of render times, and you're gonna have a more control over your scene and over every little things and aspect of your shot. This is our Neyla shot, and this shot also has a lot of render passes. I'm gonna show you the before and after. So basically we have the no editing, no color correction, and no blending passes version, and the final version after the compositing process. And you just see difference of depth and of details that the compositing really does to your scene. A cool, interesting fact about this shot in particular is that I also exported the Specular Pass, because in this particular shot, I really like the fact that you see these details on her hood, on her cave. I don't know what that is called in English. But anyway, I really like to see this. I really like to see this when she turns her head around, and you see how in the raw render she didn't have these detail going on. I basically restored that with the Specular Pass. So this was the raw render. She didn't have any details going on here, and this is with the Specular Pass enabled. You see how much of a difference it gives to your model, and it really helps to make it stand out more. To really analyze your scene, analyze your shot, and what information you want to bring out more. Okay, so the Specular Pass works in a kind of grayscale way. If you see here, you don't see her face. I did a mistake on the model. I'm gonna explain to you in case that ever happens to you, because I was so stressful. I wanted to give up. So basically, if you ever encounter this problem, just make sure that in your Blender file, the model that disappear. So in this case, let's say that it's the face that's gonna disappear. Make sure that here you have the render method to deferred, because if you have the blended, it may cause some issue. In fact, it says even here that allows for color transparency, but incompatible with render passes and ray tracing. So really pay attention to that. It took me like 2 hours to figure that out. But in this way, I didn't want it to render it over again because in the end, I only needed the details on her cape. So I simply masked the area I wanted and I played with the curves in order to have a more to bring out more the details that I needed, and I basically blended with the anad in my scene, and this is the final result, which I really like. Um, Anyway, guys, this is the first part of the compositing process that you see on this channel. I'm gonna upload more in-depth tutorials and analysis in my Patreon. You can request any tutorials or any kind of videos on my Patreon page, and I'll be doing that for you. And I'm so happy to have inspired so many people. I receive a lot of message on a daily basis about people getting inspired by this project, by these videos, and I'm so happy about it because I really work on this project every day. I'm giving like all my free time and dedication to this. I'm gonna give a shout out to all the talented voice actors that I recruited for this project. I'm so impressed about how talented they are and how they decided to offer their help for this video. I'm sure that you'll be blown away by their performance. And I can't wait to show you more about the trailer. If you want to follow the progress on this trailer and on more 3D work, make sure to check my Patreon and also the subreddit about Sly Cooper, where I post updates sometimes. And I'm gonna see you in the next video. Bye!